1. The pursuit of eudaimonia. Happiness is flourishing. Imagine this. You wake up one morning and someone asks you, what's the purpose of your life? Most of us would probably say something like, I just want to be happy. That answer isn't new. Over 2,000 years ago, Aristotle asked the same question, and he too concluded that the ultimate goal of life is happiness. But, and here's where it gets interesting, Aristotle didn't mean happiness in the way we often do today. When most of us say happiness, we mean pleasure, fun, a good mood, or even financial comfort. Aristotle's word for happiness was eudaimonia, and eudaimonia means something much deeper. Not a temporary emotional state, but a way of being, a whole life lived in excellence. It's not about having a good day, it's about having a good life. What is eudaimonia? Aristotle thought every living thing has a purpose, a natural direction it strives toward. An acorn's purpose is to grow into an oak tree. A knife's purpose is to cut well. And a human's purpose to live fully, rationally, and virtuously. Eudaimonia is that state of flourishing where a person's life aligns with their nature and potential. It's about realizing what you're capable of being. This is why eudaimonia is sometimes translated as flourishing, thriving, or the good life. Happiness versus pleasure. Now, Aristotle was careful to separate eudaimonia from mere pleasure. He noticed that people chase pleasure, wealth, and even honor, thinking these things are happiness. And sure, they can feel good. But pleasure is fleeting. Wealth can be lost. Honor depends on other people's opinions. None of these are stable foundations for a life well lived. Eudaimonia, in contrast, is something that lasts. It's the fulfillment of living in accordance with virtue, character, and reason. Think of it this way. Eating a slice of cake makes you happy for a moment, but being healthy, fit, and full of energy gives you a happiness that endures. That's the difference. The role of virtue. So how do we achieve eudaimonia? For Aristotle, it all comes down to virtue. Virtues are qualities of character like courage, generosity, honesty, and self-control that shape how we live and act. Eudaimonia isn't about luck or material success. It's about becoming a person who consistently acts well. It's about who you are at the deepest level. Aristotle even said that living virtuously is pleasurable in its own right, not the quick sugar rush of pleasure, but the deep satisfaction of knowing you're living in alignment with your highest self. A lifetime achievement. Here's another key insight. Aristotle believed you can't judge a person's happiness based on a single day or even a few years. True happiness is measured over the course of a whole life. Someone could be wealthy and famous at 30, but fall into ruin by 50. Another could endure struggles early in life, but end up flourishing in wisdom and virtue. For Aristotle, happiness isn't a snapshot. It's the story of your life as a whole. Modern relevance. Now, why does this matter to us today? Because in a world obsessed with quick fixes, instant gratification, and viral success, Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia reminds us to think bigger. Instead of asking, what makes me feel good right now? We should ask, what will help me live a life worth remembering? Eudaimonia encourages us to build habits, character, and meaning, things that outlast temporary ups and downs. Practical example. Take two people. One spends every night partying, chasing pleasure, and posting highlights on social media. The other devotes time to learning, cultivating friendships, working on projects they love, and caring for their health. Who's closer to eudaimonia? The first person might look happy from the outside, but Aristotle would say the second person, the one building a life of virtue and growth, is truly flourishing. Actionable takeaway. So what does Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia mean for you? It means you can start asking yourself, am I just chasing pleasure or am I building a good life? What virtues am I developing daily? Am I living in alignment with my highest potential? If the answer is yes, if your life has meaning, growth, and character, then you are living in eudaimonia, the true happiness Aristotle believed in. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's message is powerful and simple. The purpose of life is not fleeting pleasure, but a flourishing existence. Happiness is not something you feel in the moment. It's something you become over a lifetime. And if you can align your actions, your character, and your purpose, then, in Aristotle's words, you've found the ultimate human good. Eudaimonia. 2. The doctrine of the mean, virtue as balance. Let's imagine this. You're standing on a tightrope, stretched high above the ground. Lean too far left, you fall. Lean too far right, you also fall. But if you find the balance in the middle, you walk steadily and safely. That image captures one of Aristotle's most famous insights, the doctrine of the mean. To him, living a good life isn't about extreme behavior. It's about finding the right balance, the golden mean, between too much and too little. What is the golden mean? Aristotle noticed that virtues, the qualities that lead to eudaimonia, always exist between two vices, one of excess and one of deficiency. Take courage. Too little courage, that's cowardice. Never taking risks, always running away. Too much courage, that's recklessness, charging into danger without thinking. The virtue lies right in the middle, courage as balanced bravery. Or consider generosity. Too little generosity makes you stingy. Too much generosity turns into wastefulness. The virtue is generosity properly measured, giving wisely without holding back selfishly or throwing away resources. In every case, the golden mean is the balance point, the right action in the right way at the right time. Not a mathematical middle. Now it's important to understand, Aristotle didn't mean the mean is always the exact mathematical middle. For example, if one extreme is giving zero money and the other is giving away your entire fortune, the golden mean isn't necessarily giving away half your money. It's about appropriateness to the situation. Generosity for a billionaire might mean building hospitals. Generosity for a student might mean buying a friend lunch. The balance depends on who you are, your circumstances, and what's reasonable. Virtue is habit. Aristotle also stressed that virtues aren't things you're born with. They're habits you build. You don't become courageous by reading about courage. You become courageous by practicing courageous acts, finding that balance point again and again until it becomes part of your character. This is why Aristotle compared virtue to learning a craft or an art. A musician doesn't master the violin overnight. They practice daily, finding harmony through repetition. Virtue works the same way. You become just, generous, or brave by repeatedly practicing those actions. Everyday examples. Let's bring this into our world today. Work ethic. Too little effort makes you lazy. Too much effort, never resting, makes you burn out. The mean is healthy diligence. Working hard, but also knowing when to rest. Confidence. Too little confidence turns into insecurity. Too much confidence becomes arrogance. The mean is healthy self-assurance, where you know your worth but stay humble. Social media. Too little use might disconnect you from opportunities and friends. Too much use leads to addiction and anxiety. The mean is mindful use, staying connected without losing control. We can apply this doctrine to nearly every area of life. Why it matters. The doctrine of the mean is more than just a formula for ethics. It's a philosophy for balance in every decision. Think about the modern world. We live in extremes. Extreme diets, extreme politics, extreme productivity hacks. We're pulled in every direction, told to either do everything or do nothing. Aristotle's wisdom reminds us that the good life often lies in moderation, not in constant overindulgence, and not in rigid denial, but in balance. The challenge. But here's the tricky part. The mean isn't always obvious. How do you know when you're being courageous versus reckless, generous versus wasteful? Aristotle admitted it takes practical wisdom, experience, judgment, and reflection to find the mean. It's not a fixed rule you can memorize, it's a skill you develop. This means living virtuously requires awareness. It asks us to pause, reflect, and ask, am I going too far or not far enough? Where's the balance? A deeper insight. One of Aristotle's most brilliant observations is that the mean is personal. The right amount for one person may not be the same for another. The mean in food intake differs between an Olympic athlete and an office worker. The mean in courage looks different for a soldier on the battlefield versus a parent protecting their child. So, living well isn't about following a universal checklist. It's about finding the balance that's right for you in your life, given your role, your responsibilities, and your goals. Practical takeaway. Here's a way to practice Aristotle's doctrine today. The next time you face a decision, ask yourself, what would too little of this look like? What would too much look like? And what's the balanced choice that honors my values and my situation? By framing choices this way, you train yourself to seek the golden mean in everyday life. Closing thought for this section. At its heart, the doctrine of the mean is a call to live with balance, mindfulness, and moderation. It tells us that virtue isn't found at the edges of life in extremes of behavior, but in the steady path between them. To live well is to walk the tightrope of existence, not by avoiding risk and not by leaping blindly, but by cultivating balance step by step. That's Aristotle's genius, the recognition that happiness and virtue are not found in all or nothing, but in the wise middle ground where the human spirit can truly flourish. 3. Practical wisdom, phronesis. Imagine you're driving down a busy road. You know the rules: stop at red lights, follow the speed limit, keep your lane. But then something unexpected happens. A child runs across the street. In that moment, it's not just about following rules, it's about judgment: what to do, when to do it, and how to do it well. That's what Aristotle called phronesis, or practical wisdom. It's one of his most powerful insights. Knowledge alone isn't enough. You can know every fact, every law, every principle, but unless you can apply that knowledge to the messiness of real life, it doesn't help you live well. The difference between knowledge and wisdom. Aristotle distinguished between different kinds of knowing. Theoretical wisdom, Sophia, understanding eternal truths like mathematics, metaphysics, or the laws of nature. Technical skill, techne, knowing how to make things like building a house, cooking, or programming. Practical wisdom, phronesis, the ability to deliberate well about what is good and how to act in everyday life. You could say theoretical wisdom is knowing that. Technical skill is knowing how. Practical wisdom is knowing what to do here and now. Why practical wisdom matters. Life doesn't give us a script. Rules and laws can guide us, but they can't predict every situation. One day you might face a choice where both options look right or both look wrong. That's where practical wisdom comes in. It's the compass that helps us navigate the gray areas. When should I tell the truth, and when would the truth do more harm than good? How do I balance loyalty to a friend with responsibility to justice? What's the right amount of generosity? Enough to help without hurting myself or enabling bad behavior? These are questions no textbook can answer. They require judgment, sensitivity, and the ability to see the bigger picture. Practical wisdom and virtue. For Aristotle, virtues are the qualities that lead to flourishing, things like courage, temperance, and generosity. But here's the key. You can't actually practice virtue without practical wisdom. Courage without wisdom can become recklessness. Generosity without wisdom can become wastefulness. Honesty without wisdom can become cruelty. Practical wisdom is the conductor of the orchestra. It brings harmony to all the virtues, helping us apply them appropriately to the situation at hand. Learning practical wisdom. Unlike knowledge, you can't just read a book and become practically wise. Aristotle argued that phronesis comes from experience. Think about learning to ride a bike. You can study balance, read guides, watch videos, but at some point you have to get on the bike, wobble, and fall. Over time, you develop an intuition: when to lean, how to turn, how to stop. Practical wisdom is like that, but for life. You develop it by living, by making choices, by reflecting on successes and mistakes, and by slowly cultivating judgment. Modern example. Let's bring this into today's world. Imagine a doctor treating patients. Medical school gave her theoretical wisdom: biology, anatomy, chemistry. Years of practice gave her technical skill, performing surgeries, prescribing medicine. But what makes her a great doctor is practical wisdom: knowing when to break bad news gently, when to push a patient toward treatment, when to simply listen. That judgment, that human touch, is phronesis at work. Practical wisdom in everyday life. This isn't just for philosophers and doctors. In work, when do you push for your idea and when do you compromise? In relationships, when do you forgive and when do you set boundaries? In parenting, when do you let your child struggle and when do you step in to help? Every day, we're faced with these kinds of choices, where neither extreme seems right. Practical wisdom is what helps us find the middle path, the right action in the right way, at the right time. The role of deliberation. Aristotle said practical wisdom requires deliberation, carefully weighing options, considering consequences, and then acting. But it's not just slow, logical thinking. With experience, deliberation becomes almost second nature. A wise person develops a moral intuition, a sense of "this feels right," built on years of reflection and practice. It's like a seasoned chess player who instantly sees the best move, or a veteran firefighter who just knows which door to break down. Their wisdom is embodied, not just intellectual. Why we need it today. In our fast-paced world, we're drowning in information but starving for wisdom. We can Google any fact in seconds. We can access endless rules, studies, and advice. But none of that tells us how to apply knowledge wisely in the complex, unpredictable situations of real life. That's why Aristotle's concept of phronesis is more important than ever. It reminds us, wisdom isn't about knowing more, it's about living better. Practical takeaway. So how can we cultivate practical wisdom today? Reflect on experience. After decisions, ask what worked, what didn't. What would I do differently? Seek mentors. Learn from those who have walked the path before you. Wisdom often comes through stories and guidance. Practice empathy. Understanding others' perspectives sharpens judgment. Balance action and reflection. Don't get paralyzed by overthinking, but don't act blindly either. Each choice is an opportunity to fine-tune your judgment. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's idea of practical wisdom teaches us that the good life isn't achieved by rigid rules or abstract theories, but by the art of judgment, the lived wisdom of knowing what to do here and now. It's the kind of wisdom that transforms knowledge into action and action into a flourishing life. So if you want to live well, don't just ask, what do I know? Ask instead, how wisely can I act? Because in Aristotle's view, wisdom isn't just about thinking, it's about living. The four causes, explaining reality. Imagine someone hands you a beautiful wooden chair. You admire it, then you ask, why does this chair exist? Most of us might answer, because the carpenter built it. That's true, but for Aristotle, it's only one part of the story. He believed that to truly explain anything, whether it's a chair, a tree, or even a human being, we need to ask not one but four different kinds of why. This is known as Aristotle's theory of the four causes. It's one of his most brilliant contributions to philosophy, and it still shapes how we think about science, purpose, and reality today. The four causes. So let's break them down. The material cause. What is it made of? The wood of the chair, the marble of a statue, the steel of a skyscraper. The formal cause. What gives it shape, structure, or pattern? For the chair, it's the design, the arrangement of wood into legs, a seat, and a backrest. The efficient cause. Who or what made it? The carpenter who crafted the chair, the sculptor who carved the statue, the builders of the skyscraper. The final cause. What is it for? The purpose. A chair is for sitting, a statue is for admiration, a knife is for cutting. Together, these four causes give a complete explanation of why something exists the way it does. Why for? Aristotle noticed that if you only look at one cause, your explanation feels incomplete. If you say, this chair exists because the carpenter made it, you're ignoring the fact that it needed wood, a design, and a purpose. If you say it's made of wood, you're ignoring the fact that it was shaped into a chair and not left as a log. For Aristotle, all four perspectives are necessary to truly understand reality. From chairs to nature. Now, chairs are simple, but Aristotle applied the four causes to living things too. Take an acorn becoming an oak tree. Material cause, the organic matter inside the acorn. Formal cause, the genetic structure, the blueprint of oakness. Efficient cause, sunlight, water, soil, and natural growth processes. Final cause, to become a fully grown oak, fulfilling its nature. This is how Aristotle saw the world. Everything is a mix of material, form, cause, and purpose. The final cause and purpose. The final cause is perhaps the most unique and controversial. Today, many scientists explain things only in terms of material and efficient causes, what it's made of and what produced it. But Aristotle insisted that purpose matters. He believed nature itself is goal-directed. The eye exists for seeing. The wings of a bird exist for flying. Humans exist for flourishing through reason. This teleological view that things have built-in purposes shaped philosophy and science for centuries. Modern tensions. Now, in modern science, we often avoid talking about purpose in nature. Evolution, for example, explains eyes not as designed for seeing, but as adaptations that happen to aid survival. Still, notice how even scientists sometimes slip into Aristotle's language. The function of the heart is to pump blood. The purpose of DNA is to carry information. These are echoes of the final cause. In a way, Aristotle's framework is still with us, because humans naturally seek meaning and purpose, not just mechanics. Everyday applications. Let's bring the four causes back into our daily lives. Think of a smartphone. Material cause, glass, silicon, metal. Formal cause, the design, touchscreen, circuits, operating system. Efficient cause, engineers, factories, assembly lines. Final cause, communication, connection, entertainment. Or think about yourself. Material cause, your body, your cells. Formal cause, your DNA, your human structure. Efficient cause, your parents, the biological processes that made you. Final cause, your purpose, the meaning you give your life. That last one is deeply personal. Unlike a chair or a phone, your purpose isn't handed to you. It's something you discover, shape, and live out. Why it still matters. Aristotle's four causes remind us that reality is richer than single explanations. When we only look at material causes, life feels mechanical. When we only look at efficient causes, life feels accidental. But when we consider purpose, the final cause, life becomes meaningful. It encourages us to ask not just, how does this work, but also, what is this for? What am I for? Practical takeaway. Here's a challenge from Aristotle. The next time you look at something in your life, an object, a project, even your own actions, try to explain it through the four causes. Ask yourself, what is it made of? What gives it form or order? Who or what brought it into being? And most importantly, what is its purpose? You'll find that this framework deepens your understanding of everything around you and of yourself. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's four causes are more than just an old theory. They're a way of seeing the world in layers of meaning. To him, reality isn't just matter in motion, it's matter with form, made by causes, striving toward ends. And if we apply this thinking to our own lives, we're invited to reflect on the deepest question of all. Not just, how do I exist, but what am I for? 5. Teleology. The world has purpose. Picture this. You walk into a garden. You see an acorn buried in the soil. A few feet away, there's a young sapling, and beside it, a towering oak tree spreading its branches to the sky. For Aristotle, this isn't just a random collection of plants at different stages. It's a story of purpose. The acorn strives to become a tree. The sapling grows toward maturity. The oak fulfills the destiny written in its very nature. This is the heart of Aristotle's idea of teleology, the belief that everything in nature has an inner purpose, an end, a goal it is moving toward. What is teleology? The word telos in Greek means end or goal. Teleology, then, is the study of purpose. Aristotle believed that to truly understand something, you must ask not just, what is it made of? How does it work? But also, what is it for? What end is it aiming toward? For him, purpose wasn't something we humans impose on nature. It was built into the very fabric of reality. A nature as goal-directed, Aristotle saw the natural world as full of striving. The heart exists for pumping blood. The wings of a bird exist for flying. The mind of a human exists for reasoning. In his view, nothing in nature is by accident. Every living thing has a function, a direction, an endpoint, just as the acorn is ordered toward the oak tree. This makes Aristotle very different from his teacher Plato. Plato believed in perfect abstract forms outside the material world. Aristotle instead said, no, the purpose is already in the thing itself. The acorn doesn't need some ideal oak in another realm. Its destiny is written in its own being. Teleology and human life. Nowhere is this idea more powerful than in Aristotle's view of human beings. He asked, what is the telos of a human? What is our ultimate purpose? His answer was, to live a life of reason and virtue. Just as the eye is for seeing and the heart is for pumping blood, the human being, uniquely gifted with rationality, is for living a life guided by reason, leading to eudaimonia, or flourishing. So for Aristotle, the good life isn't random. It's not just whatever you choose it to be. It's grounded in our nature. To live well is to live according to the purpose built into us, rational, virtuous, flourishing existence. Teleology in action, everyday examples. This might sound abstract, but we actually think teleologically all the time. When you see a hammer, you know it's for driving nails. When you see a phone, you know it's for communication. When you see a student, you might think they are for learning, growing, preparing for life. Even in biology, we often describe organs by their function. The lungs are for breathing. The kidneys are for filtering waste. The immune system is for fighting infection. That's teleological thinking at work, seeing things in terms of their ends and purposes. The challenge of modern science. Now, here's where things get tricky. Modern science, especially since Darwin, tends to avoid teleology. Evolution explains the eye not as made for seeing, but as the result of random variation and natural selection. The eye survives because it happens to see, not because it was destined to see. And yet, notice how hard it is to avoid teleological language. Even scientists will say, the function of the eye is vision. It's so natural to us to see things in terms of ends that we can't stop ourselves. Some philosophers argue that teleology might be built into human thinking itself, that our minds are wired to see purpose in the world. Why Aristotle's teleology still matters. So, why does Aristotle's view still matter for us today? Because teleology isn't just about biology or physics, it's about meaning. If you see the world as purposeless, just random matter colliding in space, life can feel empty. But if you see things as aiming toward fulfillment, growth, and ends, life feels charged with meaning. Aristotle invites us to ask, what am I for? What is the purpose that my nature points me toward? This doesn't mean you have a pre-written destiny you can't escape. It means your very being has directions for flourishing. Reason, virtue, community, wisdom. By following those, you achieve your telos. Teleology in modern life. Think about your daily routines. You go to the gym. The telos isn't just lifting weights. It's health, strength, discipline. You go to school. The telos isn't memorizing facts, it's developing the mind. You build friendships. The telos isn't just passing time, it's mutual growth and support. Seeing life through Aristotle's eyes reminds us that everything has a for the sake of. Every action is aiming at some end, and the key is to make sure those ends align with your highest purpose, not just shallow goals, but genuine flourishing. Practical takeaway. So how can you live teleologically in your own life? Try this exercise. For every action you do today, ask yourself, what is this for? Eating breakfast, for nourishment, not just taste. Working hard, for growth, not just money. Talking to a friend, for connection, not just distraction. If the answer feels shallow or empty, maybe it's time to re-examine your actions. If the answer feels deep and aligned with your values, then you're living closer to your telos. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's teleology is a powerful reminder that life is not just a chain of causes, it is a journey toward ends. The acorn strives to be an oak, the child grows to be an adult, and the human soul, if it follows its nature, strives toward wisdom, virtue, and flourishing. So ask yourself, am I living for shallow ends that vanish quickly, or for the true purpose of my nature, to flourish as a human being? That's the essence of teleology. The world and your life is full of purpose. The question is, will you fulfill it? 6. Logic and the birth of reasoning. Picture a courtroom. A lawyer stands up and says, all humans are mortal. Socrates is human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. It sounds obvious, maybe even too simple, but in that simplicity lies one of the most important inventions in the history of human thought, formal logic. And the man who gave it to us was Aristotle. The birth of logic. Before Aristotle, people reasoned, of course, but reasoning was messy. It was rhetoric, persuasion, debate. Clever arguments often won, even if they weren't true. Aristotle wanted to change that. He asked, is there a way to make reasoning as precise as math, a way to tell if an argument is valid no matter who says it or how they say it? His answer was logic, the systematic rules of reasoning. He laid them out in a collection of works we now call the organon, meaning the instrument. For Aristotle, logic was the tool of all knowledge, the syllogism. The foundation of Aristotle's logic is the syllogism. A syllogism is a kind of reasoning where you connect two premises to reach a conclusion. For example, all humans are mortal. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. The beauty is that if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Logic doesn't depend on opinion, it's a structure of thought. Another example, all dogs are mammals. All mammals are animals. Therefore, all dogs are animals. Simple? Yes, but revolutionary. Aristotle turned reasoning into something you could analyze, test, and trust. Why logic matters. Think about how powerful this is. Without logic, we're vulnerable to manipulation. Someone can make an argument sound convincing, but it might be full of holes. With logic, you can strip away the rhetoric and ask, does this really follow? Aristotle gave us a defense against bad reasoning. He gave us the tools to think clearly, to separate truth from illusion. Logic as the foundation of science. This invention didn't just change philosophy, it laid the groundwork for science. Science is built on reasoning from evidence to conclusions. Without rules of logic, science would collapse into guesswork. Aristotle's system was the beginning of structured, rational inquiry. In fact, his logic was taught for nearly 2,000 years as the standard in schools. Medieval scholars, Renaissance thinkers, even early scientists used Aristotle's framework as their intellectual compass. Everyday logic, we still use syllogistic reasoning today, often without realizing it. All fruits have seeds. An apple is a fruit. Therefore, an apple has seeds. Exercise improves health. Running is exercise. Therefore, running improves health. Of course, we also use logic poorly. Ever heard someone argue like this? All cats are mammals. I am a mammal. Therefore, I am a cat. It looks like logic, but it's a mistake. The premises don't guarantee the conclusion. Aristotle's logic helps us spot these errors. The limits of logic. Now, Aristotle knew logic wasn't everything. Logic tells you whether conclusions follow from premises, but it doesn't guarantee that the premises are true. If I say, all aliens are green, this creature is an alien, therefore this creature is green. That's a valid syllogism, but it's built on false premises. Logic is a tool, not a replacement for evidence. You need both truth and reasoning. Asher, logic and rhetoric. Aristotle also wrote about rhetoric, persuasion. He didn't reject it, but he saw that without logic, persuasion could be dangerous. A skilled speaker could convince people of almost anything, but with logic, citizens could defend themselves against falsehoods. In this way, Aristotle wasn't just building philosophy, he was building democracy, critical thinking, and intellectual freedom. Modern relevance. Think about our world today. We are bombarded with claims, political speeches, advertising slogans, viral posts, conspiracy theories. How do you know what to believe? How do you separate truth from manipulation? Aristotle's answer is as relevant now as it was 2,000 years ago. Use logic. Strip away emotion and persuasion. Ask, do the conclusions really follow from the premises? Are the premises true? Logic is our shield against misinformation. Practical takeaway. Here's something you can try. The next time someone makes a strong claim, whether online, in the news, or in a conversation, test it like Aristotle would. Identify the premises. What are they assuming? Check the structure. Does the conclusion follow? Test the truth. Are the premises actually true? Most shaky arguments collapse under this simple test. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's invention of logic was a turning point in human history. He gave us a way to think with clarity, to argue with precision, to pursue truth with rigor. It was the birth of reasoning as we know it, the foundation for philosophy, science, and rational debate. And so the next time you hear someone say, that doesn't logically follow, remember, that way of thinking, that tool for truth, began with Aristotle. He gave us more than ideas. He gave us a way of thinking that protects us from deception and guides us toward knowledge. And in his eyes, the ability to reason wasn't just useful, it was what made us most human. 7. Friendship and the good life. Imagine your life without friends. No one to share your joys with, no one to lean on when you're struggling, no one who really understands you. Would that life feel complete? Aristotle thought not. In fact, he believed that friendship is one of the greatest treasures of human existence, not just a pleasant bonus, but a necessary part of living well. Friendship as essential to flourishing. For Aristotle, humans are social creatures. We are not made to live in isolation. To flourish, to achieve eudaimonia, we need relationships that nourish and sustain us. He famously wrote, without friends, no one would choose to live, even if he had all other goods. Think about that. You could have wealth, fame, and success, but without friends, life would feel hollow. Friendship, for Aristotle, is a core ingredient in the recipe of happiness. 3 kinds of friendship, but not all friendships are equal. Aristotle carefully analyzed them and identified 3 distinct types. 1. Friendships of utility. These are relationships based on mutual usefulness. Think of business partners, classmates working on a project, or neighbors who help each other out. They're practical, but shallow. When the usefulness ends, so does the friendship. 2. Friendships of pleasure. These are based on enjoyment. You like spending time together because it's fun. Maybe it's a sports buddy, a drinking partner, or a friend you game with online. These friendships can be warm, but they're fragile. If the pleasure disappears, so does the bond. 3. Friendships of virtue. This, Aristotle said, is the highest form of friendship. It's not based on what you get from the other person, but on mutual admiration of character. In this friendship, you see the good in the other, and you help each other grow in virtue. It's built on trust, respect, and shared values. Virtue friendship is rare. It takes time, vulnerability, and commitment. But when you find it, it's one of life's greatest gifts. Why virtue friendship matters most. Aristotle argued that only virtue friendship truly sustains eudaimonia. Utility and pleasure are fine. They're not bad, but they're temporary. Virtue friendship, by contrast, lasts because it's rooted in who you are, not what you have or what you enjoy at the moment. In a virtue friendship, both people want the good for each other's sake. They push each other to grow, to be more honest, more courageous, more compassionate. In other words, they don't just make life enjoyable, they make you better. Friendship as a mirror. Aristotle also described friends as a kind of mirror. When you see your friend act with kindness, generosity, or courage, you're reminded of those virtues in yourself. When you see their flaws, you may recognize your own. Friendship reflects us back to ourselves. It's a way of knowing who we are and who we might become. Friendship and self-love. Now, here's something fascinating. Aristotle tied friendship to self-love. Not selfishness, but healthy self-love. He believed you can't be a true friend unless you already have a stable sense of your own worth. If you hate yourself, you'll struggle to love another. If you're consumed by insecurity or envy, you can't build trust. But when you have a balanced love of self, when you want good things for yourself, you can extend that same love outward to others. So paradoxically, the path to deep friendship begins with caring for your own soul. Modern relevance. Now think about our modern world. Social media gives us thousands of friends or followers, but how many of those relationships are really friendships of virtue? Most are friendships of pleasure. We enjoy sharing jokes, memes, or updates. Some are friendships of utility, networking, mutual favors, but very few are the kind of friendship Aristotle described, ones that last through hardship, where both people want each other's genuine good. Aristotle challenges us to go deeper, to cultivate relationships that are real, steady, and transformative. Practical example, consider two scenarios. You have a friend who's always fun at parties, but when you face a crisis, they're nowhere to be found. That's a friendship of pleasure. You have another friend who stays up late with you when you're heartbroken, who challenges you when you're making mistakes, and who celebrates your successes as if they were their own. That's a friendship of virtue. Which one truly shapes your life? The second. That's the kind of friendship that builds eudaimonia. Practical takeaway. Here are some Aristotelian questions you can ask yourself. Are my friendships based on convenience, pleasure, or virtue? Do my closest friends make me a better person? Am I that kind of friend to others? If the answer is no, then maybe it's time to invest less in shallow connections and more in the few relationships that truly matter. Aristotle would say that 1 or 2 genuine friends of virtue are worth more than 1,000 acquaintances. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle teaches us that friendship isn't just decoration for a happy life. It's the very foundation of it. Utility fades, pleasure shifts. But friendship rooted in virtue is steady, enduring, and life-changing. So if you want to flourish, don't just ask, what am I achieving? Ask instead, who am I walking through life with, and how are we helping each other grow? Because for Aristotle, the good life is not lived alone, it's lived together, hand in hand, with true friends. 8. Politics and the ideal state. Picture yourself living completely alone, isolated on a deserted island. No neighbors, no cities, no schools, no laws, no culture, just you and nature. At first, that might sound like freedom, but quickly it would turn into survival. No shared language, no protection, no companionship, no way to develop your mind or your talents beyond the basics of staying alive. Aristotle believed that this thought experiment shows something essential about human beings. We are not made to live in isolation. We are, as he famously said, political animals. Humans as political animals. By political, Aristotle didn't mean partisan politics as we know it today. He meant something deeper, that human beings naturally form communities. Bees form hives, ants form colonies, humans form families, villages, and ultimately states. For him, this wasn't an accident of history. It was part of our nature. He argued that just as the acorn strives to become an oak, humans strive to live together in organized communities. Why? Because it's only within a community that we can fully develop our capacities, our reason, our virtue, our humanity. The purpose of the state. Now here's where Aristotle gets radical. He believed the state exists not just to keep order or provide security. Those are basic, yes, but they're not the true purpose. The state, for Aristotle, exists to help its citizens achieve eudaimonia, to flourish, to live well, to become virtuous. In other words, politics isn't just about survival, it's about the good life. This is a powerful idea and one that influenced centuries of political thought. Government should not only keep us safe, but also enable us to live fully human lives. Levels of community. Aristotle saw political life as developing in stages. Family, the smallest community where basic needs are met and bonds are formed. Village, families come together for cooperation, trade, and protection. State, polis, the highest form of community where people can pursue virtue and the common good. Each level builds on the one before, but the state is the complete form where human nature reaches fulfillment. The ideal state. So what does an ideal state look like for Aristotle? It's not simply the richest or the most powerful, it's the one that cultivates virtue in its citizens. He believed laws should guide people toward good character. Education should form not just workers, but thoughtful, ethical human beings. Leaders should govern not for personal gain, but for the well-being of the whole community. In short, the state is a partnership in living well. Types of government. Aristotle also analyzed different systems of government. He categorized them into three good forms and their corrupted versions. Monarchy, rule by one for the common good, can corrupt into tyranny, rule by one for self-interest. Aristocracy, rule by the best, the virtuous few, can corrupt into oligarchy, rule by the wealthy few. Polity, rule by the many for the common good, can corrupt into democracy, rule by the masses for selfish gain. Notice something, Aristotle didn't idealize democracy the way we often do today. For him, democracy was dangerous when it slid into mob rule. The best government, he thought, was a balanced polity, a mix of rule by the many and the few, aimed at the common good. Citizenship and responsibility. Aristotle also redefined what it means to be a citizen. Citizenship isn't just living in a state, it's participating in it. It's taking part in decision-making, in law, in shaping the direction of the community. This means that for Aristotle, freedom isn't just the right to do what you want, it's the responsibility to contribute to the good of the whole. In other words, the flourishing of the individual and the flourishing of the state are inseparable. If your city is corrupt, you cannot live a good life. If your citizens are corrupt, the city cannot thrive. Modern relevance. Think about this today. We often see politics as a distant game, something played by elites while the rest of us watch from the sidelines. Or we see government as just a provider of services, roads, hospitals, security. Aristotle challenges us to see it differently. Politics is not separate from life. It is life, organized at the highest level. And its purpose is not just order, but the flourishing of all. Imagine if governments today measured success not just by GDP or military power, but by the virtue, happiness, and wisdom of their people. That's an Aristotelian vision of politics. Practical takeaway. So how can we apply Aristotle's insight in our own lives? Start small. Be an active citizen, not just a passive one. Vote yes, but also engage in your community. Support institutions, schools, arts, public life that cultivate virtue, not just profit. Ask yourself, is my society helping people live well or merely survive? And on a personal level, Aristotle would say, realize that your flourishing is tied to the flourishing of your community. The good life isn't only about you, it's about us. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's politics is a reminder that humans are deeply interconnected. We are not solitary beings. We thrive in families, villages, and states. And the purpose of those states is not just survival, but the good life, the cultivation of virtue, wisdom, and flourishing for all. So ask yourself, am I living as a passive subject in my community or as an active citizen, helping shape a society where the good life is possible? Because for Aristotle, politics isn't a dirty game to avoid. It's the very arena where human nature fulfills itself. 9. Art, tragedy, and catharsis. Imagine sitting in a theater in ancient Athens. The air is buzzing with anticipation. The stage lights up, or rather, the torches flicker, and the tragedy begins. You watch as the hero struggles, makes mistakes, and finally meets a devastating fate. And strangely, instead of leaving the play depressed, you feel lighter, renewed, even uplifted. Why is that? Aristotle had an answer. In his book Poetics, he explored the power of art and drama, and he introduced one of his most fascinating ideas, catharsis, the cleansing of emotions through tragedy. The purpose of art. Aristotle believed art isn't just entertainment, it has a deeper role in human life. He argued that tragedy especially serves to purify our emotions, specifically pity and fear. When we see a tragic story unfold, we feel pity for the suffering of the hero and fear that the same could happen to us. But by experiencing these emotions in a safe, structured way, we release them. We come out calmer, more balanced, more human. In short, tragedy heals. The elements of tragedy. Aristotle even broke tragedy down into 6 essential parts. Plot, the most important element. A good tragedy has a coherent structure with a beginning, middle, and end. Character. The hero must be noble but flawed so we can both admire and relate to them. Thought. The ideas, themes, and moral lessons the play conveys. Diction. The way words are expressed. Melody. The role of music and rhythm. Spectacle. The visual elements, costumes, and staging. For Aristotle, the heart of tragedy was the plot, especially when it involved a hamartia, a tragic flaw or error that leads the hero to downfall. Why do we enjoy sad stories? Now, you might ask, why would anyone enjoy tragedy? Why do people seek out sad movies, heartbreaking novels, or melancholic songs? Aristotle's answer, because tragedy doesn't drag us down, it transforms us. It takes emotions that could overwhelm us in real life and gives us a way to process them. Watching Oedipus blind himself or Hamlet descend into despair, or even a modern character fall into ruin, lets us confront fear and pity in a safe space. By the end, we feel released, as if something heavy inside us has been lifted. That's catharsis. Catharsis in life. Although Aristotle applied catharsis to drama, we can extend it to other forms of art. A powerful novel can make you cry, and yet you close the book feeling strangely cleansed. A haunting piece of music can stir up grief, but leave you feeling lighter afterward. Even modern cinema, think of films like Schindler's List or The Pursuit of Happiness, can break your heart and heal you at the same time. Aristotle understood something timeless. Art is medicine for the soul. The role of mimesis, imitation. Aristotle also believed that art works through mimesis, imitation. Humans, he said, are naturally imitative creatures. From childhood, we learn by copying. Art imitates life, and through that imitation, it reveals truths we might not see in our daily routines. A play about a tragic king isn't just about that king, it's about us, about pride, ambition, mistakes, suffering, and what it means to be human. Art holds up a mirror, but it also magnifies reality, making the invisible visible. Art and education. For Aristotle, this made art not just entertainment, but education. Tragedy teaches us empathy by making us feel the struggles of others. It teaches us caution by showing the dangers of arrogance or poor choices. It teaches us resilience by allowing us to endure emotions and come out stronger. In this way, art shapes our character. It's a partner in our moral and emotional development. Modern relevance. Think about how this plays out today. Why do people binge dramas like Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones? Why do we cry during Titanic or The Green Mile? Why do sad songs top the charts? Because at some deep level, we know what Aristotle knew. We need catharsis. We need stories, music, and art to stir our souls so we can better handle the raw emotions of real life. Without art, those emotions might stay bottled up, unresolved. With art, they find expression, release, and renewal. Practical takeaway. Here's something you can try, inspired by Aristotle. The next time you're weighed down by emotion, sadness, fear, frustration, don't ignore it. Instead, turn to art. Watch a tragedy that reflects your mood. Listen to music that brings the feeling to the surface. Read poetry or novels that resonate with your struggles. Let yourself feel the full weight of it, and notice how afterward you feel lighter. That's catharsis in action. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's insight into art and tragedy shows us that beauty and sorrow are not opposites. They work together to deepen the soul. Tragedy doesn't leave us broken. It puts us back together, cleansed and stronger. So the next time you walk out of a theater or turn off a movie, tears still in your eyes but heart strangely at peace. Remember, Aristotle explained it centuries ago. Art isn't just escape, it's transformation. It takes our fear and pity and returns them to us as wisdom and strength. That is the genius of catharsis, and why Aristotle believed that art at its best changes lives. 10. The unmoved mover. God as pure actuality. Close your eyes for a moment and think of this question. Why does anything move at all? A ball rolls because you kicked it. The wind blows because of changes in pressure. A planet orbits because of gravity. But then, what started that motion and what started the one before it? If every movement is caused by something else, do we fall into an infinite chain of causes stretching back forever? Or is there a first cause, something that begins motion without itself being moved? This is the puzzle that led Aristotle to one of his most famous and mysterious ideas, the unmoved mover. Motion and change. Aristotle saw that the world is full of change, growth, decay, movement, transformation. Seeds sprout into trees. People are born, grow, and die. Stars rise and set. Everything, he argued, moves from potentiality to actuality. An acorn is potentially an oak. A child is potentially an adult. Clay is potentially a statue. Change is the process of becoming actual. But here's the key. Nothing moves from potential to actual by itself. It needs something else to bring it about. The acorn needs soil, water, sunlight. The clay needs a sculptor. The child needs parents, teachers, society. This chain of causes can't regress infinitely, Aristotle thought. There must be a first cause, something that moves everything else without itself being moved. The unmoved mover. So Aristotle reasoned there must exist an unmoved mover, the ultimate source of motion, change, and existence. What is it like? He described it as pure actuality, fully real, fully perfect, containing no potential to change. Why? Because if it had potential, it would need to be moved by something else. But the unmoved mover is the beginning of all movement, so it must be complete, eternal, and unchanging. God is thought, thinking itself. Now here's where it gets even more fascinating. Aristotle didn't describe the unmoved mover as a personal God who creates the world, intervenes in history, or answers prayers. Instead, he described it as pure mind, pure contemplation. He said the highest activity in the universe is thought. But what would perfect thought think about? Not about imperfect changing things. No, it would think about the most perfect thing possible, itself. So the unmoved mover is thought thinking itself. Pure awareness, pure intellect, pure actuality. This might sound abstract, but for Aristotle, it was a way of grounding the cosmos in something ultimate and divine. The unmoved mover and the cosmos. Aristotle believed the unmoved mover doesn't push or pull the universe like a mechanical force. Instead, it draws all things toward itself as the ultimate object of desire. Think of how a flower turns toward the sun. The sun doesn't push it physically. The flower is simply drawn toward the light. In the same way, all of nature, all of existence is drawn toward the perfection of the unmoved mover. How later thinkers used the idea. This concept influenced philosophy and theology for centuries. Medieval Christian, Jewish, and Islamic philosophers like Thomas Aquinas, Maimonides, and Avicenna all drew on Aristotle's unmoved mover to describe God as the first cause. Aquinas famously built his 5 ways arguments for the existence of God on Aristotle's idea of a first cause and pure actuality. Even today, debates about cosmology, the origin of the universe, the Big Bang, whether the chain of causes can be infinite, echo Aristotle's problem. The limits of the idea. Of course, modern science challenges some of Aristotle's cosmology. We no longer believe in his model of concentric spheres moved by divine perfection. Physics explains motion with forces, not final causes. But the deeper question remains, why is there motion? Why is there change? Why is there something rather than nothing? Aristotle's unmoved mover is one of the earliest attempts to grapple with that mystery. Modern relevance. So what can we take from this today? 1. It reminds us that seeking a first cause, a foundation, is natural to the human mind. We all want to know what lies at the beginning of the chain. 2. It challenges us to think about perfection. If the highest reality is pure thought, pure actuality, maybe our own striving for wisdom and contemplation connects us to something ultimate. 3. It humbles us. Aristotle didn't think humans could fully grasp the divine. The unmoved mover is beyond change, beyond imperfection. But by using our reason, by living thoughtfully, we participate in what makes us most human and most godlike. Practical takeaway. Here's an exercise. The next time you're overwhelmed by the chaos of change, job shifting, relationships ending, new challenges arising, step back and reflect. Behind all this flux, what is constant? What is ultimate? What do all my actions at some deep level move toward? That reflection, Aristotle would say, is the beginning of wisdom. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's unmoved mover is less about proving God in a religious sense and more about pointing to the mystery of existence itself. It's the idea that behind the endless chain of change, there is something unchanging. Behind the world of potential, there is pure actuality. Behind our restless striving, there is the perfection that all things seek. You don't have to agree with Aristotle to feel the weight of the question, because the unmoved mover reminds us of the deepest human desire to understand not just how the world moves, but why there is motion at all. 11. The nature of knowledge. Close your eyes and imagine the world as a newborn sees it. Shapes, colors, sounds, sensations, all flooding in, raw and unfiltered. Now imagine slowly, over years, you start to piece those sensations together. You learn that fire burns, that food nourishes, that people speak and mean things by their words. From this jumble of experience, knowledge is born. For Aristotle, this picture was essential. He believed that all knowledge begins with the senses. Knowledge begins in experience. Unlike his teacher Plato, who argued that knowledge comes from eternal, perfect forms existing beyond this world, Aristotle was an empiricist. That means he trusted observation. For him, the world around us isn't an imperfect shadow of some higher reality. It is reality. And to understand it, we must start with what we see, hear, touch, taste, and experience. He put it simply, nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses. From senses to understanding. But Aristotle didn't stop at raw perception. He described a process. Sensation. We perceive particular things. This apple, that sound, this color. Memory. We retain the image of that experience after it's gone. Experience. Multiple memories of similar things combine into general awareness. Apples are sweet, fire is hot. Universal knowledge. From experience, we form concepts and principles that apply to all cases. All humans are mortal. All fire burns. This, for Aristotle, is how knowledge grows, from the bottom up, not the top down, from the concrete to the abstract. The role of reason. Still, Aristotle didn't think the senses alone were enough. Animals also sense, remember, and even learn patterns. What makes humans unique is reason. Reason takes what the senses give us and organizes it into principles, causes, and explanations. For example, a dog might learn that food appears when a bell rings. A human not only notices that, but asks, why does the bell mean food? What's the cause? How does this system work? This step from experience to explanation is the leap from observation to knowledge. Nash, knowledge versus opinion. Aristotle also distinguished between true knowledge and mere opinion. Opinion is based on surface impressions. Knowledge is grounded in understanding causes. For example, you might have the opinion that the sun rises because it wants to. That's an impression. True knowledge explains the cause, the Earth's rotation. For Aristotle, to know something is to know not just that it is, but why it is. The four causes in knowledge. This ties back to his four causes. To truly know a thing, you must understand it from all sides. What it's made of, what form it has, what brought it about, what purpose it serves. Knowledge isn't shallow description, it's deep explanation. Everyday examples. Think of learning to cook. At first, you rely on memory. Last time I used too much salt, so this time I'll use less. That's experience. But as you get better, you understand why flavors balance, why heat changes texture, why timing matters. Not just repetition, but explanation. Or think of science today. Scientists don't just collect data, they seek the causes behind it. Why do cells divide? Why do planets orbit? Why do materials behave as they do? That search for causes is pure Aristotle. Contrast with Plato. Here's where Aristotle broke from Plato most clearly. Plato said that real knowledge comes from remembering eternal forms, perfect, unchanging ideas beyond the physical world. A perfect circle exists in the realm of forms, and every circle we draw here is just a flawed copy. Aristotle disagreed. He argued that the forms are already in the things themselves. The circle you draw is a circle. Its form exists right there. not in some distant realm. For Aristotle, we don't need to escape this world to find truth. We just need to study it carefully. Knowledge and wisdom. Aristotle also made a distinction between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is understanding specific facts and causes. Wisdom is understanding the highest causes, the principles that organize everything else. For example, knowing how plants grow is knowledge. Understanding the principles of life itself is wisdom. This hierarchy shaped how Aristotle saw education. Start with experience, rise to knowledge, and finally aim for wisdom. Modern relevance. Why does this matter today? Because in a world drowning in data, Aristotle reminds us that information is not knowledge. Scrolling through headlines isn't knowledge. Memorizing trivia isn't knowledge. Even collecting endless statistics isn't knowledge. True knowledge means asking why, seeking causes, finding principles that make sense of the chaos. And wisdom, that means connecting those causes into a larger vision of life. Practical takeaway. So how can you apply Aristotle's view of knowledge? Pay attention to your senses. Notice the world around you, not just through screens, but directly. Reflect on experiences. Turn memories into lessons, and lessons into patterns. Ask why. Don't settle for surface impressions. Look for causes and explanations. Seek wisdom. Go beyond facts. Ask how knowledge fits into the bigger picture of a good life. In other words, let your learning rise like a ladder, from sensation to memory, to experience, to knowledge, and finally to wisdom. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's view of knowledge is both humbling and empowering. It humbles us because it reminds us that we start as blank slates, dependent on the senses. But it empowers us because it shows that through experience, reason, and reflection, we can climb to genuine understanding of the world. For Aristotle, knowledge isn't just having facts in your head, it's seeing the causes, the principles, the why behind reality. And when you reach for wisdom, you're not just learning about the world, you're learning how to live well within it. So the next time you encounter something new, don't just ask, what is this? Ask instead, why is this? What causes it? What does it mean? Because for Aristotle, that's the beginning of knowledge and the path toward wisdom. 12. The unity of ethics and action. Imagine someone who reads every book on fitness. They know every diet plan, every exercise routine, every supplement. They can explain muscle growth, metabolism, and recovery better than most personal trainers. But they never actually work out. What would Aristotle say? He'd say that person is missing the point entirely, because for him, knowledge without action is empty. Philosophy, especially ethics, isn't something you just think about. It's something you do. Ethics as practical, not theoretical. Aristotle saw a clear difference between sciences that are theoretical, like mathematics or astronomy, and sciences that are practical, like ethics and politics. Math describes numbers whether you act on them or not. Astronomy describes the stars, which will keep moving regardless of what you do. But ethics is about living well, and that means it only matters if it changes how you act. You don't study ethics the way you study geometry. You study ethics so that your choices, habits, and character become better. Virtue in action. For Aristotle, virtues like courage, honesty, and generosity aren't things you have like possessions. They're not labels you pin on yourself. They are habits formed through action. You don't become courageous by thinking about bravery. You become courageous by acting bravely. You don't become generous by liking the idea of generosity. You become generous by giving. You don't become just by admiring justice. You become just by practicing fairness. In other words, you are what you repeatedly do. Ethics is about action shaping character, day after day. The danger of empty knowledge. Aristotle warned against people who treat philosophy like an intellectual game. It's not about showing off knowledge or winning debates. He argued that the real test of wisdom is in living it. Otherwise, you're like a sick person who knows the cure but refuses to take the medicine. Knowing the right path is useless if you don't walk it. Knowledge guiding action. But this doesn't mean knowledge is worthless. For Aristotle, ethics unites knowledge and action. Knowledge shows us the goal, eudaimonia, a flourishing life. Knowledge also helps us identify virtues and find the mean between extremes. But then comes action. Actually applying that knowledge in real situations. This unity is crucial. Knowledge without action is empty. Action without knowledge is blind. Together, they form the art of living well. Everyday examples. Think about honesty. Everyone knows honesty is good. But the real question is, do you tell the truth when it's inconvenient? Do you resist the temptation to lie when it would make things easier? Or think about courage. You can admire bravery in movies, but when the time comes to stand up for someone or to take a risk, do you act? Aristotle philosophy isn't proven in lecture halls. It's proven in choices, in how you live, moment by moment. Ethics as training. Aristotle often compared ethics to training the body. You don't get fit by reading about fitness. You get fit by exercising consistently. The same is true for the soul. You build virtues like muscles through repetition, practice, discipline. And just as an athlete has a coach, Aristotle believed we need mentors, communities, and laws that guide us toward the good. Living well isn't just an individual project, it's supported by culture and society. Modern relevance. Now think about today. We live in an age of information. Self-help books, motivational videos, TED Talks, podcasts. We're surrounded by advice on how to live better. But here's the problem. Consuming advice isn't the same as living it. You can spend hours learning productivity hacks but still procrastinate. You can watch endless videos on mindfulness but never actually sit down to meditate. Aristotle's reminder is sharp. Ethics isn't about knowing more. It's about doing more with what you know. Practical takeaway. Here's a simple exercise. 1. Identify one virtue you admire, say patience. 2. Instead of just thinking about patience, practice it in one small moment today. Pause before reacting, listen without interrupting, breathe when you feel rushed. 3. Repeat. Make it a habit. That's how knowledge becomes character. That's how philosophy becomes life. The unity of thought and action. At its core, Aristotle's ethics is about harmony. The mind shows the way, the body walks it. Knowledge points to the good, action makes it real. To split them apart, to know without acting, or to act without knowing, is to miss the essence of a good life. The flourishing human being is the one whose thoughts and actions align, who not only understands the good, but also lives it. Closing thought for this section. In the end, Aristotle's genius was to remind us that philosophy is not an escape from life. It's a guide for living. Ethics is not theory, it is practice. Happiness is not a concept, it is action. Virtue is not an idea, it is habit. So ask yourself, am I just learning about the good life, or am I living it? Because in Aristotle's view, wisdom is only complete when knowledge and action move as one.